Welcome back to Get the Check. I'm Maya.
I'm Annika.
I'm Priya.
And today we have an exciting news lineup for this episode. First, we're going to start off with Google's acquisition of Wiz, which is a cloud security company. Next, we're going to talk about the big releases from GTC. This was something that was really exciting because it kind of demonstrates where AI is heading. And finally, we're going to go into what we think is like a really fun story is the Pepsi acquisition of Poppi.
Yeah, so to start off with Wiz, Google announced its biggest acquisition ever, acquiring Wiz for $32 billion, and it was announced on March 18th, so about a week ago.
Yeah, it was an all-cash deal.
I know. It's insane. It's like 3 times bigger than their last biggest deal, which is crazy.
Yeah, and in terms of like the current M&A environment, this is also one of the biggest deals we've seen this year. Other deals we've seen are ServiceNow's agreement to purchase MoveWorks for $3 billion, CoreWeave's acquisition of Weights and Biases for $1.7 billion, and SoftBank also did an acquisition of Ampere Computing for $6.5 billion. So not hitting
Yeah, it's like
billion.
not even comparable. It was a huge deal last summer when Wiz turned down the original deal from Google, which was at $23 billion. So good for them, honestly, for coming back and getting like $10 billion more out of this deal.
Yeah, I think they were also just concerned that Lena Khan was going to block the deal as well.
I also heard this take that the CEO knew that if he said no, that it would build hype around like an IPO, because he sent like an email to employees being like, we're super committed to IPOing, and that would like bump up their valuation. So it could have been like a strategic play to say no, but leak it to the press so that everyone's like talking about them turning $23 billion down.
Yeah, and like working in cybersecurity, everyone was talking about this last year, and everyone was like, this is really good for the cybersecurity landscape as a whole, because it like proves the importance.
It's proving Abnormal's IPO potential.
Yeah, cybersecurity is sexy now. Wiz's reported metrics are 700 million ARR. They're expected to hit $1 billion ARR, putting their multiple potentially at 30x. And we haven't really seen multiples in this type of acquisition since Okta acquiring Auth0 for $6.5 billion, and that was a 42x multiple.
Yeah, Wiz does have a high valuation, and it always has, because since the beginning it was a super hyped company. And I think in order to understand that, we should go into their founding story quickly, because it was basically started by these 4 Israeli guys that are all like military veterans, and this was their second company. They had another cybersecurity company that they already exited out of, which is why investors have always valued Wiz so highly.
Yes.
They sold it to Microsoft, right?
Yeah, they sold it to Microsoft in 2015 for $320 million.
Well, because these people have like very highly specialized domain context in the specific problem. And like this problem is actually like a pretty hard problem to solve, because if you look at any of the cloud native security solutions right now, they're not even as good as Wiz. Like Wiz is beating like Amazon, Microsoft, and GCP at like cloud security.
It's like destroying them.
Yeah,
it's honestly not even
close. In their
close.
cloud native applications. Like clouds themselves can't, like Amazon themselves or AWS themselves can't build tools as good as Wiz for
like
their own
protect
cloud.
Themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then like to now do a multi-cloud solution, like I mean, there's a reason why these guys are worth so much.
To go back to what Wiz actually does and explain that a little bit more, they're basically a cloud native security platform that gives companies visibility into risks across their entire cloud environment. So to your point, like Azure, AWS, GCP, it goes into all of these. But what's different is that you don't actually have to install agents. So prior to Wiz, you actually had to go into like every single virtual machine and install an agent to like track it basically and like track all the vulnerabilities and like put it together.
Mean?
It's just like deploying software essentially. And you need someone on the security team to deploy that software. And so like it's a very highly integrated solution. So you need someone who like can go and like basically put this software package on all of these virtual machines. And that takes a while to go and do that level of like integration, honestly. And then you also have to manage like upgrades as well to those agents. And, you know, maybe you can automate a little bit, but it would be nice if someone could just do it all for you, which is what Wiz does.
Yeah.
And so what they use is like a security role, like that is permissioned to like read your entire stack and understand what's in your stack and then create a graph of what your tech stack is from that.
And like creating the security graph is a pretty big deal because it's something that a lot of other companies don't do. And by creating that, you can correlate like anything from all these different environments and then identify what the highest risk items are and then alert like the security team about these vulnerabilities. And so it's all about how you're interpreting the data. That's like where the differentiation is with Wiz versus other players.
Yeah. And then and I think what Wiz really focuses on now is like also remediation and mitigation.
Yeah. And I feel like auto remediation across security is where the industry is moving. Like if you don't have the ability to auto remediate things, then you're probably not that good of a security player, just because like the entire goal is you need less of a SOC team over time. Like you don't want to have to actually have people go in, investigate, and remediate it themselves.
And this is where AI plays really well with cybersecurity. And so like, actually I watched a Wiz demo, and basically like an AI agent just like opens up a PR to fix the things. And all you have to do is like apply, like literally press apply changes and approve. So it's like cursor for like security. I think that's part of the narrative of like why Wiz did really well, is because like they're also right positioned at the explosion of LLMs. And then if they can incorporate these LLMs correctly and have these LLMs write these PRs, then fixing these issues become a lot easier.
Yeah. So zooming out into like the cybersecurity landscape as a whole, we saw that cybercrime is expected to reach $10.5 trillion annually this year, which is insane. And so I think a lot of companies are willing to spend a lot of money on cybersecurity compared to in the past. And so that's one reason why this is like so important to Google to do now.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also because they're in third place right now behind Microsoft and Amazon. And so they know that they probably need to spend money to have like any hope of catching up.
Yeah, so if you look at market share by like the largest cloud infrastructure players, AWS was by far the highest at like 32%, followed by Azure at 22% and GCP at 11%. Those numbers might be like slightly off depending on like what you're looking at, but that's roughly the difference between the three.
So Google clearly is lagging here. And I think the biggest thing that they're trying to focus on actually is multi-cloud initiatives. So one is that they developed Anthos, which is an open platform that allows companies to deploy and manage applications across multiple cloud environments. So by the way, like 93% of enterprises have multi-cloud strategies. There's also the release of BigQuery Omni, which is a cost-effective multi-cloud analytics tool. I'm not sure how good it is, but I think these two show that they're going after like multi-cloud solutions, and like Wiz fits into that story, because like I think what they're realizing is to gain that market share, they need to go and offer these tools that are like basically offer multi-cloud solutions. Because if you think about it, like if all enterprises basically are on 3 different clouds and then you're using Google's multi-cloud solution, then you might also up your like resources for GCP basically. That's like how I'm thinking of it. It seems that like if Google's going to pay such a high multiple for Wiz, they also believe that they're not only going to get the revenue from Wiz, but that revenue is going to flood into like GCP in general.
The only thing I'd say is that as a multi-cloud player, I like don't think that they can be as objective as they've been in the past now that they're under Google's umbrella. I was looking at a lot of Reddit pages, and a bunch of companies were like, our CISO already told us that we need to go start evaluating other solutions because they're really worried that Wiz is going to have like a GCP first push, which I actually think they probably will end up having, because like Defender for Cloud right now, obviously they also support multi-cloud environments, but like most of their premium features are on Azure. And so traditionally, I'm assuming from like Wiz's perspective, when you're doing feature prioritization, you look at like which clouds are people on. Let's like target the clouds that the most people are using, since that'll have the highest impact for the most number of customers. But now that you're under Google, you do have to think about prioritizing Google first, when that might not necessarily be the best like feature approach.
Yeah, it seems like the people who are running this acquisition are going to have to walk this very hard line of how to keep existing customers and even grow your customer base that care about Azure and AWS, but then also how to help the GCP team in general and GCP revenue and prioritize, like what you said, GCP features. It's almost like you don't know like which, like is one step in one direction going to be too much is what I'm worried about, is like it's such a finicky line of like how fast these CISOs are going to like move over. The one thing I was also going to say is like, because I actually don't know this, but because Wiz is an agentless approach to cloud security, it's like not as sticky. Like just as hard as it is to integrate, it's also maybe just as easy to like migrate maybe to a new player who does a similar approach. I don't know. I'm not sure. But that could also be a risk that they're facing.
That's true. Like Orca security, they were Wiz's biggest competitor, because Wiz is pretty new. Like, it started in 2020, and Orca Security was already around back then. And they were the leader in the space because they were agentless before like anyone else was agentless. But Wiz basically won just by having a super strong go-to-market team. Like, they were so aggressive in their selling that like they did the same thing. Like, sure, they had a good UI, they had a good experience and all of that. But like the reason they actually won in the market is because like their go-to-market team go-to-marketed the other team, basically.
Well, this also might come to credit for the founders too, because like they might have had previous existing relationships that they like utilized.
I think people underestimate like the importance of having good CSMs, especially in a field like cybersecurity, where the demographic of people like tends to be older, usually male, and like a lot of people that used to work in the government. Like, that just is like the cybersecurity demographic, and I think they really value those like personal relationships. And so having a strong CSM team and sales team is like super important in cybersecurity.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
So zooming out a bit, it's worth going over if this deal is actually going to happen. It is scheduled to happen probably around like 2026. And the big difference, obviously, compared to last year when they turned down the acquisition offer, besides an additional $9 billion, is that the chairman of the FTC was Lena Khan, who is obviously controversial in the tech world. And now it's Andrew Ferguson. And it's interesting because Andrew Ferguson isn't going to be some like rubber stamp on tech M&A. Like, he's made it really clear that he wants to stand up to big tech. Trump historically has been anti-big tech as well. I would say it's like more recent that his campaign was funded by like obviously all these tech billionaires. But I listened to one of Andrew's interviews, and I think what stood out to me the most is it sounded like he was saying we're still going to stop things in tech M&A that we feel are illegal, that are like putting the consumer not first, but we're not going to try to create drawn out processes that make it super ambiguous if like action's going to be taken or not, like the way it was with like the SEC and crypto, for example.
Yeah, I was also thinking about it from Google's perspective, and they basically can't acquire anything in search. They can't acquire anything in video streaming because they like own YouTube, and they don't have a dominant market share in cloud services. So it's like, what can they acquire like that wouldn't get stopped by the FTC? And like Wiz is probably the closest thing to that.
Totally.
That like would be worth an acquisition and wouldn't get stopped by the FTC. I think is like kind of the tricky balance there.
Yeah, because the DOJ is already suing Google under 2 different cases, mainly related to them having a monopoly in search. And it's unlikely that those cases are going to get dropped just because there's a new FTC. Like, they're probably going to be maintained. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays into it, because obviously it is like specifically search or like different areas that the FTC is going after, but it's also just like Google's size. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if Google had a monopoly in search, but then like didn't also own YouTube, I feel like they wouldn't be as much of a target, even though like the actual case is about search. Like, it definitely matters that they're like one of the biggest companies in the entire world. If I had to do a pod prediction, I would say that it'd go through.
Well, Google's actually betting that it will go through because they agreed to a massive $3.2 billion termination fee if the deal collapses, which is basically them saying that like, yeah, they think that it'll go through because it's a huge proportion of like the actual deal size. And normally termination fees are not that large.
Yeah. We've also seen, I think, the landscape start to open up a little bit. Like, there's IPOs coming out with like CoreWeave, then Klarna, and most recently StubHub just filed, I think, like on Friday or something like that. And so the IPO market, the M&A market, all of it seems like there's more activity happening. Obviously, we don't know what'll end up happening, but I think it is in their favor.
The other thing I saw was that Trump fired 2 of the FTC chairs.
Oh, I didn't see
the two of the Democratic commissioners, and basically it's like under lawsuit right now on whether or not he's allowed to like
I actually did see
if he's allowed to fire them. So essentially the FTC is traditionally staffed with 5 members, 3 from the president's party and 2 from the opposition, and it is mandated by law to ensure a bipartisan composition according to 15 USC 41, which basically says not more than 3 of the commissioners shall be members of the same political party. Right now, there's only 2.
And Lena Khan left.
And Lena Khan, because like Lena Khan left, so that's vacant. And then Trump also fired 2 of the Democratic ones. So basically, there's 2 out of the 5 that are filled right now.
So are they allowed to vote? Like, if there's only 2 of them, or do you need a full FTC?
I actually have no clue on how the FTC is run, but I don't know. But essentially, they're suing over this. And in 1935, there's this thing called the Humphreys Executor Decision, which upheld limits on presidential power to fire independent agency members. And they're trying to figure out whether or not this like follows under that. But essentially, it shows like it's weird because like it shows that like Trump was originally anti-big tech. Andrew Ferguson is like pretty anti-big tech. Trump fires 2 Democratic officials. He's probably going to try to put people who are like maybe pro M&A, like more of the pro M&A environment. And so people, I think, are also betting on like the restaffing going through. But yeah.
That makes sense. Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the deal over the next year. And it was a big payday for all the employees. I saw it was something like $400,000 each.
Yeah, well, I saw there it was like hundreds of new millionaires have just like been added into the tech landscape.
But there was like, did you guys see there was some clause in the actual terms of the acquisition that like every employee basically makes like $400K or something?
That's sick.
That's cool though. That's really cool.
It was like something like that.
Yeah.
There was like some fee.
Yeah. It's also a really big win for the VCs. Index invested in their seed and has been doubling down pretty much every round, and they're set to earn $4.3 billion. Sequoia will clear $3 billion.
This is like their golden child.
Yeah, which is basically helping like LPs and their worries about the lack of big exits right now, because like the funds are starting to like there's like funds that close, funds that open, and like LPs are just worried that exits are not happening. But this helps out a little bit. Exciting.
Our next story is Pepsi's acquisition of Poppi, which is a quote-unquote healthy prebiotic soda. They acquired them for $1.95 billion with another $300 million in cash tax benefits, making the net purchase price like $1.65 billion.
It's also crazy considering their last valuation was at $400 million.
I know, it is crazy. And Pepsi shares were up 2% after the announcement. It was really funny to see on TikTok because the angel round for Poppi was back in like 2020. So a lot of influencers, which totally makes sense, invest in this brand considering it's like consumer and trendy and healthy. And so I saw like Griffin Johnson's girlfriend, like the TikToker, being like, thank God like my boyfriend invested in Poppi, because each angel saw like an 88x return. So if you put like 5K into it, you now have 400K.
Yeah, no, and I think it's so smart that they did this because all of these brands obviously use influencers to market their products. Yeah. But Poppi took this a step further in actually having them have a stake in like what they're marketing.
Yeah, which makes you want to market them even further. Yeah. Which is actually pretty unique and not done in the like food and beverage industry in general.
Another person that invested was Alex Earl. And so this was more recently. So I think they've been taking on angels just like as time goes on as well. It's estimated that she has like 1% of Poppi, which is kind of crazy considering she got in last year in 2024. Wow. Okay. But like she got in at the previous valuation, obviously. And so I did the math on it. And if it's true that she has 1%, her payout is almost $20 million.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Wow. That's crazy.
Big bucks. Damn.
I wonder if she did the Super Bowl ad for free. Definitely not.
Yeah, she did a Super Bowl ad. They also gifted like 32 influencers vending machines, which they came under a ton of fire for doing because it was seen as like wasteful, because these influencers just had like vending machines in their house that were Poppi branded. Yeah. They've definitely used their fair share of influencer marketing.
Alex Earls also recently partnered with like Sip Margaritas, which also isn't her brand, but she's known to be like one of the biggest investors in it. And she's doing all the marketing for it as well.
She actually made a video talking about it. And she was just saying, oh, I looked into making like my own brand. And then I decided to like invest in existing brands that I love. And she was talking about it from like a personal interest perspective, which I'm sure is like also true. But I think it is a smarter investment decision too, because the amount of work she has to put in probably goes down a lot too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And yeah, so it seems like a win-win. I guess going into the background of the company, they actually started as a home brewed beverage sold at farmers markets by Stephen and Allison Ellsworth, who are husband and wife, which is cute. I think their original brand was called like Mother. Yeah. And if you see the bottles, they're really ugly. So they've come a long way.
It was called Mother Beverage. Yeah.
Yeah. And they pitched their product on Shark Tank and actually got a $400,000 investment from Rohan Oza. After the show, that's when they then rebranded to Poppi with like all the new marketing, the new name, all of that.
Yeah. And he owns 25% of the company, right?
I don't know exactly what it is, but I saw a lot of rumors that like he potentially got out of it. Or at least partially got out of it like prior to the acquisition. I don't know if that's true or not.
Because I was going to say if he owns 25% of the company still. That's crazy.
Yeah. They rebranded to Poppi in 2020, and then revenue surged from local sales to $100 million annually by 2023.
Yeah.
So the rebrand was definitely worth it.
And they're basically everywhere. They're in like 120 retailers, Whole Foods, Target, Costco. Now we just seem like an ad, but they're not paying us.
I mean, yeah, it's just like a household name at this point.
Yeah. And now they're expected to do $500 million in ARR by the end of this year.
Yeah, it's not without their controversy though, because their whole shtick is like healthy soda, which is like, how could a soda be healthy? And basically they're facing legal action for misleading customers about their gut health benefits. The lawsuit says Poppi sodas have only 2 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is not enough to ever show a gut health benefit. And if you had enough Poppis to reach the level at which you could have a gut health prebiotic benefit, you've consumed so much sugar that you have like other bigger insulin problems or something. And I mean, I'm sure they're right.
Wait, I was honestly gagged by this because I haven't ever really looked into it before, but like the biggest competitor is Olipop. Like everyone talks about that. They have 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in Olipop. So the fact that Poppi only has like 2 to 3 is actually significantly lower, because they say that 5 grams is the point at which like you see a health benefit.
Oh, so it's possible that they could up the grams and not make it taste worse. Because like Olipop does it.
In theory, like I don't know exactly how they get there, but I didn't know there was like such a big difference between the two and what the actual like gut health benefits were. Coke's Simply Pop also I think has like 5 grams. So it literally is just Poppi that's like below the line of like 5 grams.
That is interesting. And they did have to settle for $9 million this year. And there's a hearing scheduled in May. But basically, it's seeming likely that consumers that have bought Poppi between 2020 and whatever settlement date can get a payout for basically being misled.
Oh,
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
I've never bought Poppi.
Nice.
I mean, $9 million is like nothing to them, but well, is it nothing? Yeah.
I mean,
it's
if
nothing.
they're expecting 500 million this year, it like still is.
Yeah. But it's like,
yeah.
I don't think it's like top of mind.
they'll probably just be
Pepsi
more
will just pay it off.
Pepsi
Oh,
will be, yeah,
true.
It's
yeah.
like whatever to them.
I mean, they'll probably just like be more careful with their marketing going forward. And I feel like once they're in the Pepsi umbrella, like Pepsi's lawyers and stuff are probably super specific about marketing. So
Yeah.
they'll be fine.
That's true. On to like why Pepsi even acquired them in the first place. Soda sales have fell 25% since 2000.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. We've not been selling as much
Wait,
soda
good
as we
job,
did in
guys.
the 90s.
That's good for our society.
That is really
I
good.
never drink soda. I think it's disgusting.
I also think it's disgusting.
Yeah.
But that I started thinking that once I started drinking alcohol. So
What?
I don't know if it's necessary.
As Chase and
Yeah.
then it ruined it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never have soda.
Really like a good Mexi Coke with your
No.
Mexican food? Bro,
I think it's
It's
like
so unhealthy.
yeah.
it is unhealthy. I feel like my
And
mom
it's
never let us.
It
drink
doesn't
soda.
taste that good to me. Like for example, like ice cream is so unhealthy, but it tastes super good to me.
Because you are a sugar fiend.
Yeah.
We didn't need to put her on blast like that.
But you know, in second grade, the teacher asked me my favorite flavor, and I said sugar. And I got clowned for it for like years, because I actually like didn't know that wasn't a flavor. I was like a really weird kid.
Yeah. So anyways, they've been needing to shift their strategy because soda sales now account for less than 25% of PepsiCo's like overall revenue. The company needs to diversify their portfolio. The functional soda market, which includes like prebiotic sodas, basically sodas meant to serve a purpose. That market is projected to grow 15% annually through 2030.
The prebiotic soda market is like a few $100 million, so it's still like really small.
I was actually thinking, I'm so used to evaluating like tech acquisition deals. And then when I was like looking at the multiples, I was like, they got Poppi for like a 4x multiple when we're like literally talking about Wiz, which is at like a 30x multiple. And so I was like doing some research, and it is pretty common that the multiples are like this. Like it's actually on the higher end. For example, like Siete, Pepsi acquiring Siete for $1.2 billion was only a 2x valuation on their ARR.
It was only 2x?
Yeah. But
It's just like a completely different market.
it's because like of the profit margins. Because you can't like Pepsi can solve for a little bit of profit margins through their distribution and manufacturing strategies and stuff, but there's only so much you can make these things as like cheap as possible, because like these things basically go for like their cost of goods, or like the cost of materials to make it.
That makes sense. And I think the Siete thing brings up an interesting conversation about like build versus buy. You have Pepsi that's acquiring Poppi, and then you have Coca-Cola, which launched Simply Pop, but they could have like in theory acquired Olipop. And I think it's a real life example of like these two competitors in the soda place, and one of them choosing to build and one of them choosing to buy, which I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on like what you think the right approach is and why you think they took different approaches.
Well, so I think in terms of the second point of why they took different approaches, this is like completely in line with how they've historically acted. And so I think like Pepsi has always gone down the buy approach and Coke has always gone down the build approach. Pepsi also acquired like Gatorade, SodaStream, Rockstar, and they've been more aggressive with like venture investing, whereas like Coke tends to have like a super strong R&D team and like decides to build things in-house and branch out under their own umbrella. There's like Coke, like the actual drink, and then they have like Coke Zero and like all of these different flavors of Coke, and they tend to take that approach over buying.
They also have had like poor experience with past acquisitions. Like they acquired Zico coconut water in 2013 and then discontinued it. So it seems like their M&A arm is like not as strong, and their R&D arm, to your point, is a lot stronger. So I think part of it is just like from a company perspective, like a company culture perspective.
I do think, though, that Coca-Cola might be forced to make a shift here, because if you look at the things that they've been good at, for example, they released Fanta in 1940, they released Sprite in 1961, both like smash hits, right? And like their own brand names themselves. Coke Zero, that was in 2005, and we haven't seen like a strong release from them in the era of social media, and I think like that makes a huge difference here. Is it possible for a corporation like Coca-Cola to be able to connect with Gen Z and the social media crowd to be able to build a food and beverage brand the way that they're being built right now? And the answer to me, I think, is no, because we haven't seen something that has come out. Do they need to necessarily do this? Not really, but now that we're seeing the shift towards prebiotic sodas, like that's why they're going to go with their normal approach, but I don't know if they'll be able to actually run a brand like Poppi.
Yeah, that's true, because basically Simply Pop is coming out of their like Minute Maid Simply Beverage umbrella, which like to your point, like Minute Maid is what I think about like elementary school. I don't know, like it's nothing like recent or cool necessarily. So yeah, I definitely see that point.
Yeah, and I haven't seen much like Simply Pop marketing versus like I see Poppi marketing all the time.
Well, it also came out last month, so
yeah, but I feel like if you're launching a product like that, you probably have a big marketing push in theory.
That's true. And like the few times that Coke has acquired businesses, it like typically has done well. Like their vitamin water one didn't do well, but they also did acquire Topo Chico, which is like now a huge name, and they're building out Topo Chico hard seltzer under their brand and doing all of that. So in that scenario, it really helped them. I would say like Topo Chico is probably the hypest brand that I know of.
Wait, Topo Chico is that brand. And what's so funny is in my office, we did a blind tasting and it came out like last in like the
really?
Yeah, it did. And like that's how you know it's a brand. Like
That's
I'm not even joking, the
crazy.
Kirkland like sparkling water did better.
That's actually crazy. I want to do that.
Yeah. So to your point, it's all about brand. And it's like, do we think Coke can make a brand? I actually don't think that like Simply Pop will do well, but
I don't think it'll do well either, because I think like Poppi and Olipop are already two huge competitors in this space, and no one really considers anything outside of the two of those.
I think one of the big takeaways from this whole story for me is about how even the most gut-friendly, nutrition-positive brands end up being acquired by some mega giant like Pepsi that's basically like ruined the health of America. It's kind of ironic.
I also like kind of disagree that they are an actually healthy brand. Just in general, I think there's so many brands that brand themselves as being healthy, but they're not, which is like the reason they're in this lawsuit in the first place. It's just like a shift in the industry to brand yourself as much as possible, but not actually provide any health benefits.
It's like when companies greenwash for climate change. Health wash.
Well, it's hard to grow like a good tasting brand that's healthy. Like America is just going to want something that like looks good, but they're really going to evaluate it on taste. That's what creates a return rate. Like food and beverage industry really cares about repeat customers.
And to the being venture backed point, I feel like building this brand requires like slow, steady consumer growth. But when you're venture backed, they don't expect that. Like they're used to operating like a tech company and getting not only like multiples like that, but just like growing in that way. And so I think the organic growth that you need to build a super strong food and beverage brand doesn't align with the venture framework.
There's also no consequence, right? Like maybe you settle a $10 million lawsuit along the way for misleading customers, but like overall you end up on top.
I was gonna say like this is similar to RX bars. Like RX bars used to be like all the hype, and then they got acquired, and now everyone's like, whatever.
No one likes them anymore, but they were what everyone wanted at some point. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Even like Siete too. Like when all my whole TikTok feed when Siete got acquired was like, I'm never eating Siete again. TikTok's like dramatic, so I'm sure people are still eating Siete. But when Pepsi acquired Siete, they haven't changed any of the branding. Like it looks the exact same.
Yeah, and I'm sure they won't.
they try not to.
Yeah, they might change like some of the formulas though. Like it'll be interesting to see if like Pepsi, for example, like adds more prebiotic fiber or like anything else.
Well, hopefully, otherwise they're gonna keep being in lawsuits.
True. Nice. So with that, we can move on to GTC, which is Nvidia's annual conference and also competes with our brand, also GTC.
Jensen Huang calls it the AI Super Bowl, which I think is kind of funny.
Wait, that's so
he
true.
dresses the part. He's always in like a black leather jacket and a glass of wine, just walking through the crowds.
Yeah, it's so cool to see. I mean, in general, GTC was always a smash hit this year. It becomes a bigger and bigger deal as well.
I also think the fact that they've lost a lot of their market cap recently means like more people than ever are watching this conference to see if the demand for Nvidia's chips is going to like increase, or if it's like a different phase of AI where like we don't need as much compute.
Yeah, so with this story, we're planning to cover 3 big stories from the conference, which is the updates around the GPUs, specifically Blackwell. Then we'll go into the personal AI supercomputer, and then we'll also touch on NVIDIA's partnership with GM, as well as Groot.
I love Groot. It's so cute.
The cute little robot. Well, Groot
Blue is the cute little robot.
Blue is the robot. Groot is like the model.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they announced the Blackwell Ultra, which is the B300, which is their next gen GPU. The original Blackwell model was announced last year at GTC, and this was a new architecture. Prior to this, they were using the Hopper architecture. We've talked about H100s, H200s on this podcast before, so that was all the Hopper architecture. And now they're moving to Blackwell.
The Hopper GPUs basically have built the current generation of AI models that we see. Grok 3 was trained with 100,000 H100s. And the biggest difference between Blackwell, like there's a good amount of differences between the Blackwell architecture and Hopper architecture. One is around their floating point performance and precision. So GPUs can use different precision formats and support either very high precision formats or lower precision formats. So FP4 means 4-bit floating point, which means you only use 4 bits to represent numbers, versus FP8 is like 8 bits to represent numbers. FP64 is 64 bits. And this is basically exponentially increases how big these numbers are that you can represent and the precision.
Like the precision of what?
The precision of numbers. Because like, for example, the number 0.1 is not as precise as 0.111, right? Anyways, so when GPUs were being built by NVIDIA pre-explosion of LLMs, they focused on very high precision. This really makes sense for tasks like climate modeling, physics, engineering that really need GPUs to solve really complex mathematical problems. But then once GPUs started being used for more LLM training, they realized they didn't need as much precision. And this is because basically neural networks are inherently noise tolerant due to the stochastic nature of training and redundant parameterization in large models. This is a bunch of fancy words just to say that neural networks just don't need high precision. And so when you lower the precision, you get better efficiency. And so Blackwell has its focus on FP4, which is the lowest precision that they've been able to support natively on these chips. And this allows AI models to run faster and use less memory.
Yeah, so they're saying that you're getting more like flops per dollar. And what that means, like flop stands for floating point operations per second, which is what Maya was just talking about in terms of like how many floating point operations you can do. And it's just like a raw measure of compute. And so using the same amount of energy and the same hardware, you're actually able to like get more power out of the GPU. So for like the Blackwell Ultra chip, they're saying that the GPU can deliver 40 times the performance of the previous architecture. And this is like specifically for tasks like model training, since that's like what they're optimizing for now in comparison to what they were optimizing for before. And this is important because it just means training huge models is way cheaper than it used to be.
Do you know 40x on which chip versus which chip?
It was the B100s versus the H100s.
Okay. The other claim was that NVIDIA claimed a 30x performance gain for the B200s over the H200s, and the B200s had FP4 quantization and the H200s have FP8 quantization. And essentially, there was a bunch of articles about how like they were comparing apples to oranges, because comparing an FP4 chip to an FP8 chip is like not exact, because like there's more things than just the floating point precisions that they do. Like there's better, what is it called?
The unified memory.
Yeah.
They like actually change the way that the memory sits like on the GPU.
Yeah.
And so by unifying the memory, you don't have to like go in and copy the memory over and over again, since you just like have it.
Yeah. So basically you want to look at the like improvements on like the architectural optimizations, and then the improvements from the precisions like optimizations. And so essentially there was a bunch of people on X being like, Nvidia is like claiming that it's like 30x more when it's really not. It's like 18x, and it's like it was like this whole thing. But basically they're just trying to sell the FP4 selling point.
Yeah. There's a ton of debates on that, because I think I was also looking into the utilization of the GPUs, and there was like that whole debate as well as like what is actually the percentage. Like, is it 22%? Is it 51%? But basically, the new chips have a better memory architecture, which in theory would lead to like a higher utilization of the chip. And the reason for this is because they're able to like parallelize the processes within the GPU itself. So today, GPUs are generally only used at like 20 to 40% of the capacity in the real world. If you're like optimizing for this in a lab, you can get it higher to like 40 to 60%. But when you actually put this into practice, that's not what happens. And at inference, you're actually only getting like 10 to 20%. So you're not even like reaching those levels. With the Blackwell architecture, they're saying that they can get the real world training to 80 to 90%. Now, maybe that's like a little bit of an exaggeration here, but the point is that you are getting like a lot more out of the GPU than you were before due to the new architecture.
It's like 3x better.
Yeah. And then the final thing I'll say is that like the Blackwell Ultra, which is the B300, focuses on AI reasoning rather than like reinventing the core architecture. And what this really means is that they're trying to support faster inference on LLMs compared to the hoppers, because they're seeing that like people are caring more about the test time scaling. So like when we talk about AI, there's like 3 types of scaling: pre-training scaling, post-training scaling, and test time scaling. And test time scaling is like when you're like using more inference tokens and like asking the model to think more. And so like the B300 is specifically focusing on like improving that as well and having a faster inference than compared to the hopper.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up is just like the environmental impacts of using these GPUs. Going back to like the flops per dollar that you're getting, you are able to get a lot more out of it with using the same energy amount. And so that's like really good for the environment, because in terms of like actual savings, you are using a fraction of the energy per operation. So that means there's less cooling, less electricity, less of all of that. And so I know that's been a big concern. And so hopefully this will help address that.
On the flip side, I think with the increase in efficiency, people are also asking if this cannibalizes NVIDIA's own growth, because in theory, you need less chips if they're like 3x better at what they do. And I guess like curious what your guys' thoughts are, but I feel like there will be enough of an increase in demand that it doesn't like substantially decrease the demand that they have. And I also think like obviously chips need to innovate, and they're going to keep being like at the forefront of that innovation. So they're not going to like stop innovating their chips just so that like people use more of them.
Yeah, it's just like as price of intelligence decreases overall, then the demand for increase in intelligence capabilities continues to push and increase, because you're like, oh, things are cheaper, let's do even more. Yeah. And so, yeah, like as cost drops, net consumption paradoxically increases.
And you also probably do need fewer chips per model, like that is the goal. But at the same time, you want to have more and more models, which is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and this all hinges on the capability of if they're actually able to ship these chips, which has always been a concern with Nvidia and them being able to. I mean, like that's also like the huge holdup. How do you get access to GPUs? You need to either be a hyperscaler or have like a connection in the industry, and like,
which is not true.
Yeah, it is. It is true.
The chips that they released at GTC last year, which were like the B100s, still haven't really been used in production as far as like we know.
Yeah, they've been delivered but haven't been used, and like there's been like delays in the B200. So the way Nvidia is tackling this is that for the B300s, they're only supporting the components separately. So they're only supporting the B300 GPU and the Grace CPU, but they're not building a fully integrated board. So like in the previous model for B200s, Nvidia supplied fully integrated Bianca boards, which includes the GPU, the CPU, the memory, the regulator modules, and other components. But creating this full board is like way harder than than just creating the individual chips. And the hyperscalers know how to use these individual chips. So they're focusing on providing this production to the hyperscalers.
They are kind of going in the direction, though, of like continuing to only support the hyperscalers and like not necessarily giving these chips out to anyone. But I guess our next story on the personal AI supercomputers makes up for that a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, so that feeds into the point that they are continuing to only support these hyperscalers, and these chips are pretty difficult to get. But at the same time, at GTC, they announced their personal AI supercomputers, so that might be a way of combating this.
Yeah, so they announced two, which one is the DJX Spark and the DJX Station. We'll start with the Spark, which is like basically a PC, if you can think about it, and it's powered by the GB10 Grace Blackwell superchip. It delivers up to 1 petaflop of AI performance and can support models with up to 200 billion parameters.
Yeah, for context, basically, you can also put two of these machines together using what's called their interconnect link. And so if you do that, then you'd be able to run basically anything. Like you could run like the newest model of Llama, which has 400 billion parameters, since each of these run like 200 billion. But yeah, it's $3,000.
I think that's the biggest selling point. Like $3,000 is insane.
Yeah.
It's only like $1,000 more than this laptop I'm holding right here.
Literally. Wait, $3,000 is cheaper than my work laptop.
Yeah.
As Priya's come under fire for on the internet.
Yeah, and what it unlocks is that researchers and developers can now prototype, fine-tune, and run large AI models locally on these desktops without relying on data center resources. And this obviously just makes things faster because you don't have to depend on cloud computing. You don't have to depend on continuous internet connectivity. You don't have to worry about data sharing requirements, which
you
is
don't
like
have to like hack a little rig together.
Yeah.
Buy all of these different purchases. Wait, it's so funny because when I used to work in the Microsoft office, there were a ton of GPUs just like sitting on the 4th floor that were there. And sometimes we used to go up there just to go look around, and they were all sitting there, and people were like, can I just take this home? Is that illegal?
Yeah.
Like no one ever did anything, but it's crazy because like they're like $100,000 GPUs just like sitting there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people are like begging for GPUs.
No, and that's
Meanwhile, people are begging for like 10K. Well, they have like hundreds of like $100,000 GPUs just like sitting there.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing, is that you're sitting there like waiting for your cloud computing resources, right? Or you're like waiting to get access to this GPU. And if you have a computer, you can have it whenever you want. Like you can use it whenever you want and however you want. It's like, it's just like allowing.
Yeah, it's like local.
It's because it's local, right? And so it's like akin to like the introduction of like the PC, where when people started having personal computers, like they were able to start building software applications themselves, and a bunch of hobbyists emerged. Researchers can do things, college students can do things.
I think academia will actually like hugely benefit from this, because a lot of colleges just like don't have the grants or the funding to purchase
especially now.
GPUs.
Yeah,
especially now. And so I think having things like this will be really good for academia and research.
Yeah, I mean,
not in like the huge AI labs.
It moves AI's center of gravity from cloud computing providers to these individual creators, which is nice.
I also think that as there's like the trend of 1 or 2 people starting like a full-fledged company, it also makes that easier too. Yeah. And it kind of goes into our conversation earlier about how Nvidia isn't cannibalizing their own demand because they're also increasing their customer base with like moves like this.
Yeah, it is a pivot for Nvidia, because since they traditionally focus on like large enterprises, hyperscalers, like all of this, and now there is a shift to like building a consumer product, because it's kind of been like gatekept in the past.
The one question I have though is, how can you buy a DJX Spark? Like, is it going to be easy to buy a DJX Spark? I have no clue.
I feel like they'll sell out quickly.
It's available for reservations right now, but how do
Are you
get
reserving one?
I don't know. Maybe I should, honestly.
Wait, you should.
But I don't know if anyone can reserve one. I have to look into this.
But
well,
you're
a tech
GTC
podcaster.
I'll be like, hey, GTC is covering GTC. Give me a
Wait, we should
give me a
try to get an Nvidia sponsorship.
That would be sick. That would be sick. But yeah,
I don't know if they're focused on micro influencers.
probably not. It's okay. But yeah, I'm excited for what this does for the AI industry in general, and what this does for like the individual creators.
Yeah, and we didn't touch on this, but there's also DGX Station, which is basically just like the desktop computer version of it for more demanding AI workflows. Very similar to the Spark, nothing hugely different. It's just a little more powerful.
Yeah. And then that brings us to our third story from this conference, which is the GM and Nvidia partnership. And historically, Nvidia has been very involved in the autonomous vehicle industry by supplying GPUs to all the companies we know, like Waymo and Tesla. And they also have an autonomous vehicle platform that is called like Drive OS, and it's basically real-time AI processing and integration of advanced driving. And now they have a partnership they've announced with General Motors specifically.
Yeah. So they already had a partnership with GM to do the things that you were saying, like training the AI models for simulation, validation, but they now expanded it even further to include like plant designs, operations, things like that. So some of the things that they'll be using is that now GPU will also use NVIDIA Omniverse with Cosmos, which will help train AI manufacturing models. And they're also doing the whole like digital twin situation with factories. So they'll be doing that to optimize like production processes, and finally, they'll be training their robotics platform as well.
Yeah, the digital twin thing is interesting because I remember when we consulted for Bright Machines in college, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, Bright Machines was like working on digital twin technology, and I remember researching it a ton, and it was like very new, and everyone was like, we don't know like if this is just like all hype or like something that can actually be done. And now I feel like I've just been hearing it a lot more recently. But maybe that's just like random, but I feel like...
I mean, I think it's like because of Palantir.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
they were able to do it.
Yeah, like I think like Palantir like popularized the idea of it, and it is like the best way for manufacturing to work. So it just like makes sense that everyone's using it now.
Yeah. Why would GM use like Nvidia for something like this versus like Palantir?
It could be a sticking point of the deal. Like it could be of like, for example, it could be that like GM wants to use NVIDIA for like Drive AGX or Drive OS, and then NVIDIA goes, well, like you also have to use our Omniverse. Like it could be one of those like deal sticking points that like NVIDIA puts on the table of like, you have to use this. Or it could be that GM just wants to use it.
Because Omniverse is also being used to train their robots. Like it's being used across the board. It's not like only in this use case.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It might be that like, because NVIDIA seems to be like a leader in robotics and training robotics, and GM might want to integrate that. Like Palantir is really good as like business analytics, like understanding what exists and using what that exists towards your advantage to like make better decisions. But it seems like NVIDIA Omniverse and NVIDIA Cosmos will not only do that, which is like optimization, but also help with the training part on like having robots do more tasks. And that is something that Palantir doesn't have the capability to do.
Because even with the Anduril partnership, like they were partnering with Palantir on like the first part of what you were saying, but then Anduril was using their own software for actually like training the robots. So I just think like they just don't have that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then Drive AGX is in-vehicle hardware, and it basically is a supercomputer that processes like sensor data in order to just help the driver system in the car.
I think this all goes towards the idea of NVIDIA trying to verticalize AI and build an entire AI ecosystem. We've kind of seen this repeatedly through all the stories. Like with Blackwell, they're now not supporting like the entire board, but they're like just supporting the chips, but then building all the architecture that you need like around this chip to like actually support it. And in this case, they're building like an AI ecosystem beyond the hardware. So this kind of idea just comes up over and over. And these are like 3 of the big stories that we saw, but there were some other ones as well that were fun that came out of GTC.
Yeah. Groot is my favorite.
I know. It's so cute.
It is cute. So Groot, which stands for, what is it? General
yeah.
Wait, you want to say it?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Generalist Robot 00 Technology. 00?
00. I think the 00 was for the ooh part of the Groot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they just wanted to name it Groot.
Yeah, it's a humanoid robot foundational model, and it's open sourced, and it's the world's first open sourced foundational model for humanoid robots. This model is aimed at accelerating robotic development, obviously, with integrating like physical AI and real world physics and understanding. So like taking in the inputs of like what your like visual processing and other sensors, and how you're like moving through the world physically as an input, rather than just like typing words and asking questions.
I think this is so cool. And I actually made a TikTok about this morning because I think it's fascinating how in robotics, we try to program every single little action that a robot could take, but it's like, you can't predict what a human is going to do. Like humans are the most unpredictable things that exist. And so now we've gone full circle to let's just train the robot the way babies learn how to exist in the world.
Yeah.
Which is so funny. And like, it all makes sense. It's like, duh, why didn't I think about that sooner? But the idea is like, teach this robot how to like exist in the world, take in like all these data signals, and then using Omniverse, that's like what they're able to use to then like extrapolate like a million scenarios out of like one scenario. So they'll like visualize something and then it's like, okay, this is how it worked in this scenario, but let's tweak it and create a million other scenarios of what could have happened. And so that's like how they're training these models. But I just think it's like so full circle.
It is. And seeing that little robot on stage, what's his name? Blue. Yeah. Oh my God.
That
so
was
cute.
Partnership with Disney Research.
Yeah.
And one of our friends was there for it, and they said that they showed it on the screen and you like didn't know it was gonna come out, and then it actually came out.
I know, I watched the
like
keynote.
a Disney
Yeah.
character.
Yeah. No, it does. It like feels like it could be in WALL-E.
Yeah. No,
You know
it
what I-
does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just, dude, but then at the same time, when I saw the video, I was like so fascinated, and then also just like this huge pit in my stomach, like because I realized how close we are to like real humanoid robots. And like
We're actually really close.
we're really close.
Yeah.
You know what's so funny is we work with like a robots company at my work, and basically they said if we ship the product that we're going to ship, they're going to give us humanoid robots.
That's crazy.
No, I'm not even joking. They'll give us one for the office. And I'm like so motivated to ship now. But anyways.
Yeah. No, we actually are, because one of the other demos that they showed at GTC using Groot was like, I think it was Neo. I don't know if you saw that one, but they've like designed the humanoid robot to actually look like a human, because they put like not skin, but it's like some sort of material over it. No, like it looks totally normal. Like it looks like a robot, but you can't see like the individual, like, you know how you can see a robot moving usually? It's like fully covered in like a skin basically. And the video was just like him doing the dishes next to you. So it's like you wash the dishes, hand it to him, and he loads it.
That's crazy.
And I was like, whoa. And it was like real. Like they actually were able to do it. And I was like, this is insane.
That is insane. That like this brings me to like iRobot. You remember that movie? So I watched it when I was like 5 or 6 or something like that, and I've had nightmares like ever since. Like and I have like recurring nightmares. Yeah, because it's like the robots like basically like hound him over the car or something. There's like this crazy scene, and it just like freaked me out as a child. And now that we're actually seeing humanoids like that is really scary to me.
We saw like pretty realistic robots at the Sphere in Vegas.
Yeah.
And they were like talking to people, and there was like a little girl, and they were like, oh, who's the person next to you? And she was like, oh, my friend. And then the robot was like, I would love to know how to make friends. Like, can you teach me?
That's creepy.
And that it was unprompted. Like, it was an unscripted thing. She was just like in the audience.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
And he was like, how old are you? And she was like 4. And he was like, oh, I'm like 2. Like, we're so similar in age. And I was like, oh my God. But yeah, and then I guess like the other big thing is like Nvidia is also opening their quantum lab.
Yeah. So this is in collaboration with Harvard and MIT's quantum groups. They are calling it the Nvidia Accelerated Quantum Research Center. Nothing exciting.
Everyone is going. I feel like quantum's having a moment. We've been talking about quantum.
Yeah,
so much
it is.
recently.
It's having a moment. I mean, I think these are just forges in the fire.
Yeah.
But yeah. Cool. Well, that was a super fun story to listen to. Moving on to my favorite segment of the pod, which is companies that won't get our check. Deel.
Every week we've done won't get our check. We need a would get our check soon.
Next week.
we should do that soon. We also like stretch the bounds of like what fits in companies that won't get our check, because like we're doing Deel this week, but they might have gotten our check pre this lawsuit coming out. So it's not like we would have done any good.
Last week we would have given them our check. This week not so much.
Yeah, so Rippling and Deel, I'm sure you've already heard what happened, but we're going to try to go a little bit more into it. So they're obviously competitors in the workforce management space. They're both valued at around $12 billion, with Rippling being a little bit bigger, like probably $13 billion. I would say like Rippling is a really well-known company because like Parker Conrad, their CEO, is a big tech personality. And I would say Deel is like a little bit more of a lower key company.
Yeah, but they also, at one point, they were the fastest company to reach 100 million ARR before Wiz took them over.
Historically, both of these companies have clashed too. Did you guys know that Parker Conrad basically barred former Rippling employees who left and went to Deel from participating in secondary stock sales?
He can do that.
Apparently, I read that he did that.
Like the lore is like so deep though, because did you read about like the funding round by Co2?
No.
Okay, so basically in 2023, Parker Conrad is putting together a $700 million round led by Co2. Co2 and like a bunch of other investors. And it was supposed to be the largest private funding round. People were like all talking about it. Obviously, like it hadn't happened, but everyone like knew about it in the industry. And so Deel got word of this and they were like, well, we should just do that deal. So Deel went directly to Co2 and was like, we'll give you the exact same terms that like Rippling's giving you, exact same deal. We're growing way faster than them. We have a stronger international presence. You should just do the deal with us. And they were like, you're right, we should. They dropped Rippling.
No
it
way.
never went through. Deel got the exact same terms of that deal, probably why they're valued so similarly. And they just took the deal like right under Parker Conrad.
But then why does Co2 like want to do it with Deel over Rippling? Like what's the benefit to that?
Because they were growing faster.
Yeah, the argument was that they're growing faster and they had a stronger international presence than Rippling had. And like I'm sure they said something to them. Like I don't know.
Speaking of international presence, like the other tidbit I found is there's a Rippling investor that's tied to a lawsuit in Florida right now accusing Deel of violating Russian sanctions. They just like have all of these like little proxy wars going on basically.
Yeah.
But to get into the allegations, I mean, most of you have probably heard about it by now on a high level, but Rippling filed a lawsuit on March 17th that Parker Conrad also tweeted out, accusing Deel of orchestrating a corporate espionage scheme through Keith O'Brien, who is a Rippling employee in the Dublin office. And they came with the receipts. Like they had like proof that he had accessed confidential Slack channels over 6,000 times. And he was stealing a bunch of secrets about like their sales pipeline, their customer churn risks, like all these other things. And do you guys hear like what originally tipped them off?
Isn't it like they created a Slack channel?
You're talking about like how they caught him.
Yeah.
But why they originally thought that they had a mole at the company was because someone literally made a WhatsApp group of a bunch of current Rippling employees telling them to like leave and come to Deel. But obviously one of the employees like told someone at Rippling and they were like, wait, like there's no way you'd have everyone's number unless you're a current employee because they're like recent employees in it. And it was using like phone numbers. Because like I think like Deel probably thought that like if you use people's personal phone numbers to contact them versus like LinkedIn or email, that it's like more successful. But then
can't you just get phone numbers on the internet these days?
I guess I don't know, that's what like tipped them off.
So they thought basically, oh, if they have phone numbers, that means it's coming from a current employee at Rippling.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically then they set up the honeypot trap that you were talking about where they create a fake Slack channel referencing damaging information about Deel. And then they basically reach out as like a favor. Rippling sends a letter to Deel's leadership and it's like the people at the top, like the CEO, the CFO, and then someone else that's pretty high up.
Yeah. And the CFO is like the CEO's dad, which is crazy.
Yeah. It's like a family business. Like I think like one of their brothers is involved too or something. And they basically reference this Slack channel in the letter and say that like in the Slack channel there's like some information that's like compromising about Deel, but they don't actually.
How does that even come up in the letter? I'm so confused.
I think they were doing it as a favor, right?
It's a setup.
Well, I know it's a setup, but I'm saying like what like guys did they go under?
Rippling has their legal counsel reach out to Deel and say that like there's like certain people at Rippling saying compromising things about Deel, and in the legal notice there's screenshots, and one of the screenshots has like a bunch of things blacked out of it, but they purposely kept the Slack channel name not blacked out, and then the next thing you know the mole is like searching for the Slack channel name in Slack.
That's crazy.
And they have the history. Like Slack I guess tells you every single thing you're doing.
Yeah. You can track like your entire life, like everything that you're doing in Slack.
Yeah, so they immediately identify who the mole is. They go to the courts, they get an arrest warrant, and then they go to the office to arrest the guy, and he runs into the bathroom, flushes his phone down the toilet, it seems. They like search the plumbing for his phone and stuff. It was like insane.
Oh, really?
I think so.
That's crazy.
And he runs away, and they basically tell him, they're like, if you run away, like that's illegal and you're not allowed to. And he's like, I'll take that risk. And sprints away. So now Deel's like denying all of it, obviously.
Yeah.
But clearly
There's,
they
like,
did
so
it.
much
So yeah. There's like a lot of evidence. I don't know what the conclusion here is besides just the fact that some of the tech rivalries have gone insane.
Yeah, we've also like covered so many of them on the pod, like the Databricks Snowflake.
Yeah.
Rampbrex.
Yeah.
Rippling Deel.
Oh, I wanted to talk about like whether or not the individual employee DS should be like held responsible and like face prison time, or if it should just be mainly on the employer or Deel.
I mean, he is like the mole is the one that was actually doing the work. I guess like maybe there's an argument somewhere that he was like coerced into it for like whatever reason, but from like what I know about the case, I would think like both of them would face.
And there have been past cases where the mole in corporate espionage is sent to jail.
Yeah, there's like the Victor Lee case where a former research scientist at Avery Dennison was charged for like wire fraud, and he transferred trade secrets to 4Pillars, and he was sentenced to 6 months.
It's like light work.
Yeah, that was no, but the sentencing is normally like on the lower end. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's more of just like people would know not to hire you.
About him. Like,
It's also like a really bad look for Deel. Like, I feel like Deel is going to have a harder time hiring people. Like, I would not work for a company that's been caught up in that.
That's true. What if you were like a company that like uses Deel? Would you like stop your contract or no?
I think I would pay attention and be like, that's a weird thing to get caught up in.
Yeah, I guess my question is like, does this lawsuit like hurt Deel's chance at like a decent exit, like either an IPO or an acquisition? Because like they're still a private company.
It
right?
definitely hurts their brand image. That being
Yeah.
said, they're in like B2B SaaS, so it's not like the end of the world.
I think in the long term, they'll be fine. Like, I think also Parker Conrad has called out like shady shit that Deel has done the entire time. Like, this goes back years, and it's always been a call out. Because there was a time post that whole like raising new money round where Deel actually tried to acquire Rippling, and Rippling was like, what? Like, no, why would we do that? But I think that in the long term, it'll just like be whatever.
Really? Because I feel like the loss of talent that you might get from like a lawsuit like this is like potentially damaging enough to not turn the company around.
I also think that like, you know, if your company is doing shady things though. And
Really?
I think like internally, like, sure, this is like definitely extreme, obviously, but I think that you have an idea of how your leadership is and like how far they would go in a lot of scenarios. And I don't think it's like that out of left field usually.
Have we seen any like big case of like corporate espionage like this happen in like the startup world like recently? Because like there's been stuff like there's obviously stuff like in the trading world or in the research world, but not necessarily like in the tech startup like SaaS world.
I think there have been instances of like a company in talks to get acquired before, and then like the company pretending they want to do an acquisition just like rips it off.
Yeah. Should we do pod predictions on in 5 years whether Deel is a thing or not?
I think it'll be a thing. It's like a $13 billion, $12 billion company.
Yeah, I think it'll be a thing, but I feel like Rippling is the household name.
Like Rippling
At least
will win
in-
out in
at
that.
least
Rippling
in
would
the
have
US.
won regardless. Like, I feel like Rippling is a better regarded company regardless.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, do any of your companies use Deel? I know so many companies that use Rippling.
Yeah, that's true.
Do they have different markets? Like, who are their typical customers? Are they different? Is Deel like more?
I don't know if
I've
it's different.
never heard
I
of
just
a
think that
company that
Deel has
uses
more
Deel.
international customers.
That totally makes sense. That's probably why we haven't heard.
well,
of them
and
as
that's like
much.
why the whole like Russia thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right? Like I think that is just what the difference is.
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Cool. Well, this has been a fun episode, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with an interview with the CMO of Glean, so tune in to listen to that. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.